I want you to turn to Matthew chapter 5. I'm anxious to get into the material with you. We've been building yesterday towards this. We're looking at verse 27 and going to read down through verse 30. Matthew chapter 5, verse 27 down through verse 30. It is one of the 6 illustrations that he gives us. This is the second one, and we're going to try to deal with it in the next 3 nights. So you may not want to come back. Here's what he has to say, verse 27. You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. Again, you cannot possibly come to the Sermon on the Mount without understanding the premise. If you don't get the premise, all is lost. And we spent all day yesterday trying to establish the premise, and I want to give it to you again just in review. The premise is given to us in the very first verse of the Sermon on the Mount. It is given in the Beatitudes. And the basic premise is this: you're absolutely helpless. He's whacking you on the back saying, congratulations, absolutely congratulating you. Hey, you're in, you've made it, you're so fortunate, woo, aren't you something? And he's congratulating you, telling you you are something because you are absolutely helpless. You are poor in spirit. You have no resource whatsoever. And if you will live in that resource, live within the boundaries of the resource, if you step out, if you say, hey, I can handle this, whoop, you've lost it. If you get cocky, oh, you're in trouble. It's staying in the boundaries, embracing that like grief embraces your life. Embrace your helplessness. And if you will do that, that will open up the way for him to come in his overwhelming resource, and you will be comforted, the word for the Paraclete, and the Holy Spirit will give you his resource, and in a merger, in a coming together, not a visitation, a coming together. Not a touch, a coming together. Not always giving me advice. No, a coming together, a merger. Your life and his life literally coming together. Your helplessness, his overwhelming resource, literally coming together. And in that coming together, merging, mixing, you become this new creature that he defines as the kingdom of God. So, he's not the kingdom. You're not the kingdom. We are the kingdom, meaning him and me. He's decided he can't be this on his own. You certainly can't be this on your own because you're helpless. But in the merger, you become this new creature. Now, again, that's not a doctrinal idea. That's not I have a belief system. That's not an activity that I do. That's not an accomplishment I make. That's not something I earn. That's a relational concept of intimacy between me and him. Do you know him like that? Out of that, all the Beatitudes begin to spill. Meekness, mercy, filling, peace, seeing God, purity, rejoicing in persecution, all that spills out of that. Now, how does that look on the street? Salt and light, 2 imageries he gives us. Salt and light, which is not a doing thing. Because how could it be a doing thing when you are absolutely helpless? So this is you're being salt and light, and your whole world is being influenced, not because you're anything, but because you and your helplessness have been filled with a resource, and the new creature is doing the activity sourced by his resource. Now he says, I didn't come to destroy the Old Testament. This is a fulfillment of everything God has been dreaming about for your life. So don't look so shocked. This is not new. Hey, we've been talking about this for thousands of years. This is the plan of God for your life. Come on. This is what he's been moving to, this new creature thing. In fact, Jesus says, I'm the fulfillment of this whole thing. I'm the helpless man who has been filled with the resource of God, and I'm the first one in the kingdom. Did you know that God is not in the kingdom? Not by himself. Of course, man isn't in the kingdom by himself either. It's the merger that's in the kingdom. And you know who the king of the kingdom is? Well, Jesus, the first man to have this relationship. So what does this relationship look like? Exactly like him. So do you know what you're expected to be in the kingdom? Exactly what he is. Well, I can't do that. I know, because you're helpless. So it has to be the merger. In fact, he says, and he climaxes in verse 20, which we dealt with slightly last night. He climaxes in verse 20 and says, for I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of God. So he sets up this contrast, righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, everything you've known in the old covenant. Hey, it doesn't hack it. Everything in the new covenant is so far above that this doesn't even begin to touch that. You remember what he said about John the Baptist? He said John the Baptist is the greatest man that's ever been born. Whoa, wouldn't you like Jesus to say that about you? Greatest person that's ever been born. John the Baptist is head and shoulders above them all. John the Baptist stands on the shoulders of everybody else. The last prophet. He pulled off the old righteousness, the old covenant, the law structure. He pulled that off better than anybody ever pulled that off. Took a Nazirite vow. All Nazarenes should. Nod your heads. Took a Nazirite vow for life. Not 3 months, not a month, for life. Which consists of, number 1, never cutting your hair. I could go for that. Number 2, never touching a dead thing. I'm for that. Number 3, no strong drink. Coffee is out. Woo! Glory. That didn't go over well. So there's 3 things. He did better than anybody. He's the top of the heap. Jesus said, but do you understand? John the Baptist at the top of the heap of all that's going on in an Old Testament doesn't even compare to the least in the kingdom. He who is least. Well, who is it that's least in the kingdom? Well, it's a guy by the name of He. Well, who's that? It's generic, people, because everybody in the kingdom is least because they're helpless. Filled with his resource. So this doesn't even begin. I know you're not getting this, he said. So let me give you some examples. Give 6 of them. We started in on the first one last night. He begins in verse 21 to say, you have heard that it was said by those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. Wow. Do not murder. Hey, I got all this anger inside. I can't help it. I got feelings. I got prejudice. I have bad days. I'm only a human being. I'm married. I'm doing the best I can. I know. I'm trying as hard as I can. I know. I take long walks. I got it. I take showers. Okay, cold ones. I count to 10. Why? You got to put a lid on this thing. You can't let your anger run wild. You can't just do everything you feel like doing. You can't do to everybody what you feel like doing to them. Come on, get a grip on your life. Well, what's the line? What's the boundary? What's the lid you're going to put on this thing? 6th commandment, do not kill. I'm not going to murder anybody. It's the best I can pull off. Can you believe this? Jesus said, I say to you, whoever is angry. Oh, come on. You're not going to tell me you can't get angry. Now, come on. That's a standard nobody's going to meet up to. And if you think that's bad, read the rest of it. Whoever says to his brother, Raka, and last night we told you that means idiot. Looking at your brother saying, you idiot. Well, I wouldn't say that to him. I feel that about him. What an idiot. Hasn't got a brain in his head. Whoever says, you fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. See, we've gone from murder, being in danger of hellfire, to demeaning, belittling, looking down on, considering an individual less. That's ridiculous, people. Nobody's going to live up to that. There's no way to pull that off. Which means you've just admitted your helplessness. You can't get this done. Isn't it exciting that Christianity is absolutely impossible? It just can't be done. I know. Have you tried it? You can't live above sin. I know. You can't love everybody. You're right. You can't always be what you ought to be. You're exactly right. You can't always have the attitude you ought to have. I know. I'm only a human being. I know. I'm doing my best. I know. You're only proving the point that he's making. You're helpless. You can't possibly get this done. Which is why you've got to embrace don't use your helplessness as an excuse. Well, I'm only human. One of the guys in our church, his favorite statement is, I don't walk on water. Like that makes everything he does okay. Don't use this as an excuse. Embrace this for the reality of who you are. And if you will embrace that, totally embrace that, he will come. And in the merger, could you live like you couldn't live? Could you be what you couldn't be? Could you love like you can't love? Could you act like you can't act? Second illustration. He says, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. Seventh commandment. The old timer said, over here in the corner of my life, I've got an appetite. Yeah, I got lots of appetites. One of them is a sexual appetite, but I have lots of appetites. This is one appetite among many appetites. No big deal. But hey, it's a pleasurable appetite, and hey, it wants to be satisfied, but it's just one appetite. I also like chocolate. But you can't let any of your appetites run wild, because if you let your appetites run wild, if you eat too much chocolate, your face breaks out. Your stomach gets sick. Come on, you got to control. You got to put a lid on this thing. And I have this sexual appetite over here. You can't let that thing run wild. You got to put a lid on that thing. Hey, draw some boundaries. Get it under control. Sake of family, kids. Come on, wife. Society. Decency. Come on. What's the line you're going to draw on your sexual activity? Well, the seventh commandment. Don't cheat on your wife. Had a young lady who said, I admit to you, she said, I'm on drugs. I like drugs. I take drugs. I'm going to continue to take drugs. But she said, I will never sell my body for the sake of drugs. That's a line I won't cross. You've got to draw lines. You've drawn lines. Come on. Everybody draws lines. What's the line over which, hey, I'm not all I ought to be, but hey, I'll never do that. Come on, you got to do that. So here's my sexual activity, my sexual appetite. It's just one appetite in my life. It's over here in a corner. You got to put a lid on it, get it under control. And the line I've drawn is I'm not going to cheat on my wife. Emotional affairs? Probably. Want to cheat on her? Yeah. Lust? Yeah. But I never do it. She'd kill me. So, hey, no, not going to. It's the line. It's the lid. Jesus says, I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Do you know that in all 6 of the illustrations, that's the only place the heart is mentioned? Do you realize that the word heart is used 161 times in the New Testament and never, ever, 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 ever does it refer to the blood pumper? It's never a physical organ. The pastor and I have been debating this. If I take you and I slit you right down the middle and I just crack you wide open and I go to the core of your system, what makes you who you are, what makes you in your existence, what makes you the distinct individual different from everybody else that you are, what makes you live, what makes you in his image, what sources you, where everything comes out of your life, where it comes from. If I slit you down the middle and go to the very core of your system, right down at the very heart, what do you want to call that? I don't care. Call that spirit, call that soul, call that whatever you want to call it. It's the core of your life. Jesus says that's where the issue is, at the core of your heart. And he says, if you go down to the core of your system, think about this. If you go to the core of your system, the very internal essence of who you are that produces you, you know what you'll find? Interwoven into every fiber of who you are. Sexuality. See, you guys want to say, oh, it's just a little drive over in the corner, and you got to put it. What are you talking about? Don't you know at the very core of your life is your sexuality? That sexuality is not some side issue. Sexuality is not one thing among many that I got to deal with. Don't you know at the core of your system, making up the very essence of who you are, is sexuality. It's in the heart, man. I tried to find one single area in my life that isn't affected by my sexuality. I couldn't find one. I don't walk like my wife. Why? She's feminine. I'm masculine. She drags behind and says, slow down. My sexuality is at the core of everything I am, ladies and gentlemen. From the whiskers on my chin, to the way I fix my hair, to the dress that I have, to the way that I walk, to the way that I approach life, to the way that I drive my car. My wife has a problem. She sits in the corner and cries. I say, get a hammer and hit the thing. I mean, whoa, come on. What do you... To what I like and what I don't like? Let's watch TV. What are we going to watch? Oh, let's watch something romantic. No, let's watch somebody hit somebody. What's that all about? I can see you guys don't identify with this at all. See, that's all about sexuality. See, I'm trying to find one single thing in my life that isn't affected by my sexuality, and I can't find one. And you can say, hey, you can take me to Matthew chapter, 21, where they came with the question, the Sadducees, who didn't believe in the resurrection, and gave this proposal that this guy married this gal, and then he died, and she married his brother, and he died, and she married his brother, and he died, and she married 7 of the brothers, and they all died, and then she died, and you're not surprised at that. So now they're all dead, and when they get to heaven, whose wife will she be? And Jesus said, you guys, and you're going to quote that thing and say there's no marriage in heaven, but that's not what he's saying. You can't convince me for one single moment that there isn't going to be sexuality in heaven. If you would take the sexuality out of my wife, femininity out of my wife, who would she be? Do you know God created sexuality in everything? All the animal life, all the plant life, everything God created, He made. And you're going to say at the second time, it's all gone. So we're talking about that flows through your whole life and determines your viewpoint, how you look at things, how you respond. Now, if you come to this passage and say, oh, Jesus is giving us a new rule. Whoever looks at a woman, don't look at women. Now, folks, how are you going to pull that off? They're everywhere. This is not a new rule. Don't look at women. In fact, let's be honest. Every time I shake anybody's hand, I automatically, or in fact, it's worse than that. Every time I look at anybody, I'm automatically aware of their sexuality. I don't see a woman without being aware she's a woman. I don't see a man without being aware he's a man. I don't shake hands with a woman like I shake hands with a man. Why? Sexuality. See this? What are you talking about here? So this is not a new rule. This is about what you see, your perspective. Do you know that our world is a visual world? We are visual people. Oh, it's all over the scriptures. Sexuality is the core of visibility. For instance, advertisement. I'm sitting before the TV and this advertisement comes on hemorrhoid medicine. I'm not interested in hemorrhoid medicine, but I really get interested. Why? Because they got this gorgeous talking to me about hemorrhoid medicine. I'm in the car going to buy hemorrhoid medicine. My wife watches this cooking channel. You know, she's doing the laundry and the cooking channel will be on. And I'm walking in the living room and here's this cooking channel, because she never cooks any of it. But here's this cooking channel. And whoa, they had this contest between this guy, these two people, and they had this dessert contest. And here were the ingredients. They had a certain amount of time to make the thing. And it was to be, and whoever, and they won a big, and so it went. And so this guy won this cooking this dessert thing. And his dessert, the reason he won was because he made this little square cake thing, and then on top of that he had this little, and then on top of that he had this, and then on top of that he had that, and on top of that, and the thing was so sensual. How'd it taste? Nobody cares. Whoa! Come on, you would admit that fashion has nothing to do with comfort, how it feels. It all has to do with sensuality, sexuality. Playboy magazine in first edition was 1953. Do you know that Playboy magazine today is worth $4.9 million? Did you know that sex.com, no content, just the domain name, just the right to use the name, is worth $65 million? Did you know that 28,258 people view pornography every single second? Did you know that there is a new pornographic video produced every 30 9 minutes. And you can say, that's all out there in the world. You're right on that. But see, Promise Keepers found out that there were 53% of Promise Keepers, guys who claim to be Christians, who watch pornography weekly. And that across the evangelical church, 45% of our families confess pornography is a major problem in their home. The role of the eye in the scriptures is phenomenal. Do you know what the first, sure you do, the first sin, Genesis chapter 3. You read that thing. The devil came along, and we'll talk about this in greater detail another night, but the devil came along and said, can you eat of the fruit of the tree? And she said, no. God said not to. And then the devil responded with these words, you will not surely die, for God knows in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be open. And it said, so when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and it was pleasant to the eyes, she picked. And when she picked and gave to her husband, you know what the first effect of sin in the human life was? Oh, let me read it to you. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew they were naked. They'd been naked all the time. Nobody knew it. Now they had a different See, this is not about some little, this is about what's at the core of my life and how I see things. Do you understand in the scriptures that nobody does any miracles concerning the eyes in the Old Testament? Do you know that in the New Testament, nobody does any miracles concerning the eyes except Jesus? Isn't that interesting? Do you know what he said? Just turn a page, chapter 6. Verse 22, the lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. If your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Which all has to do with viewpoint. Viewpoint. So can you understand? Do you know in the Greek language there's one word for hearing, akuo. There are 5 words for seeing. Because it's a big subject. Viewpoint really does matter. So again, if you come to our passage and say, well, Jesus is giving us a new rule for viewing. No, he's not. He's talking to us about what's down here in the core of your heart, which causes what you see. So is this about sexuality? Forget about sexuality. Let's talk about the murder thing. You shall not murder. Oh, that's my lid. Wait a minute. What makes me want to murder? How I see you. What makes me mad? How I view it. What makes me upset? How I view a thing. Why do some things upset some people and don't upset another? Oh, it all has to do with what's in here in your viewpoint. See, this is about, well, Manly, what makes a dirty joke funny? The punchline. Nah, not true. Do you know there's some folks that don't think dirty jokes are funny? For instance, do this. This coming Sunday, Luke is going to preach. You, up in the middle of his sermon, jump to your feet and say, I want to tell a dirty joke. Lay it out and see how many people laugh. What makes a dirty joke funny? Viewpoint. Hey, a wife has just nursed her husband in cancer for 5 years. He's just been shriveling up and finally dies. Go up to her and whack her on the back and say, I got a cancer joke to tell you. See if she laughs. Go to a young couple who's just lost their baby, struggled with the birth, and finally, at last, the baby lived for about 3 months and died. Go up and whack them on the back and say, I got a dead baby joke to tell you. See who laughs. See, it all depends on which is all about, which causes how you. So do you see what I need? Well, I need an accountability group to ask me the tough questions, brother. Did you look at pornography this week? Did you lie to me? Maybe that isn't what I need. Maybe I need a transformation which changes how I view. That's the merger. Helplessness filled with his. And this isn't just about how am I going to keep from getting angry? You can't. Why? Because you at the core of your life has this irritation, which causes how you. So what do you need? A transformation at the. Manly, what are you going to do about the homosexual? I don't know. What are you going to do about the guy who thinks he's a girl? I have no idea, dear people. Whoa. What are you going to do about the same-sex marriage? It's above my pay grade, folks. I have no clue what to do about any of that. I only know that's not the problem. See, the problem is here. In the sexuality that's in the heart, that needs the mind of Christ, that needs the attitude and the flow of his life, that needs to embrace its helplessness and say, this is way beyond me. Resource of the mighty God, your emotions, how you feel, your mind, how you think, your attitude, what you want, your deal, your will, and your desires implanted into my. If we could merge and I could think like he thinks and feel like he feels and see like he sees. So we're not dealing with. Jesus, Lord, I liked it better when it was just an appetite I had to control. Now I'm finding you want to revolutionize the very inner being of my beings. You want to change the very core of my system. You want radical internal transformation within me. See, I like the rule thing better, God. But you want to join me in my mind until I think like you think. You want to join me in my emotions until I feel about things the way you feel about them.